Let's stay with this issue now and speak to Advocate Brenda Madumise, Director of the Wise Collective, Luke Lamprecht, Head of Advocacy at Women and Men Against Child Abuse. Good afternoon to you both, and thank you so much for your time. I'll begin with you, Luke. Your reaction to this ruling?
I think it is an absolute victory for justice in South Africa, because what the defense, well, what the accused said in his defense was that these boys and their families knew what they were getting into. The age of consent is 16, and he really was not only denying what he had done, but he was denying the impact it had on the children, as well as his responsibility for anything that went wrong. And the court completely rejected that view. What the court did was accept that the victims had told the truth. And in that finding, it is so important, because what we are seeing is that if the court shows that it listens to victims, and if a case is well investigated, we do have justice. And what that in turn does is it gives people confidence in coming forward to the criminal justice system to make cases and give evidence. And hopefully this is going to give rise to more of the victims coming forward, so that we can hold more of the 160 odd men that Mr. Ackerman had on his client list who were buying sex from children being brought to justice.
And Advocate Madumise, I'd like to stay with that last point that Luke is raising, because there are concerns that even after he was found guilty, that these boys were performing acts to his clients, the clients that were on the database of Mr. Ackerman. Shouldn't those men have also been in the dock with him? And should we not be going after them as a country? I mean, through the NPA?
No, absolutely. I think we should go after them. I'm hoping, heard the NPA spokesperson saying that they are hoping that this judgment will open up and give the confidence to other victims to come out into the open and assist the NPA to convict the other 100 or so other men. And it can only happen once those victims can't come out into the open. And what this judgment has done, just given a little bit of confidence to all of us that the criminal justice system can work when it's supposed to work. And this is a network of abuse of young boys. It extends beyond South Africa, and it's international. So we need to start to take it serious. And I'm hoping that South Africans are watching and understand the impact of this judgment, but also what happened to these young boys, and that we believe them. And that's crucial, that we believe. The court has given us confidence that they believe the victim's version, that it is true what they said happened to them. We still have a Omotoso case that is still outstanding, that is dragging for reasons unknown to many of us. So there are many of these cases that still has to go through the criminal justice system and for justice to happen, because it's about grooming. Omotoso's case is also about of young women.
And Advocate Madumise, let's stay with the network, because the network has been a concern for quite some time now. Because I know you say that it's likely to go internationally, but just how higher up do you suspect that this particular sex ring goes?
Listen, if you had advocate and the acting judge Paul Kennedy, and if you know Paul Kennedy, he was smart, a well-known advocate in the legal fraternity. And I can tell you now, if you ask, and we have done that, we have written to the JSC, we have written to the Chief Justice to ask the question, when did the JSE and the legal fraternity become aware? And we want to know, once they became aware of acting judge Paul Kennedy and his involvement in this case, what did they do about it? Because we tend to think that those who have power, those who have got resources, can never, and we cannot even fathom that a acting judge can do such a thing, right? Because we think that they are beyond such, and we think that abuse only happens and it's actually perpetrated by those who don't go to school, or who don't have the resources. Once you have the resources, you are able to cover up your acts. You can cover up your criminality. And I can tell you now, and if you look at the Epstein case and you look at this case, powerful men use money to cover up their acts of criminality. And in this case, Paul Kennedy knew that if he has to appear before a court, his image, his reputation is in shreds, but also to talk about the others that he was working with, and he was not willing to do that. And that's what happens most of the time with these powerful men who've got money and got resources, and they think that they can buy their way out of any situation.
Look, staying with Judge Paul Kennedy, how much of a bittersweet moment was it in court as you were there today that, this particular ruling has come out, but he's not there to face the music and answer to some of the critical questions?
I think that the judge was extraordinarily wise in the way he added the paragraph on the acting judge or Advocate Kennedy, because he even mentioned in adding the paragraph on Paul Kennedy that he was a bit tormented by adding it because the man is dead and it's difficult to speak ill of the dead. However, again, in line with the president's 5-point plan, he said it was important for the court to make some kind of statement or say something about the role of Paul Kennedy in the abuse for the sake of the victim's closure. And it was an incredible moment because even you cannot even escape your guilt if you die. And the advocate was referring to the Epstein case. I mean, a local case would be the Frankel matter. So in the Frankel 8 matter, which was a civil case because of the complications around the fact that boys couldn't be raped in the old legislation, etc. And in that case, the victims actually got a settlement from the deceased estate of Mr. Frankel. So not even in dying can you remove the fact that you have now, what the judge said really, and I mean, he said a very powerful closing sentence. He said, this is not a happy ending, because right throughout the evidence, Mr. Ackerman was talking about massages with happy endings. And the judge said, this is the end of a horrendous journey for these young boys. And he had to say something because he had to say that Paul Kennedy was critical to the commission of these crimes. And when he knew in the judge's word that the game was up, he then took himself out. And the big thing is that he didn't escape justice in terms of the judge and the judgment, where the judge made a comment on his role for the sake of closure for the victims. So even if Mr. Kennedy's aim was to escape justice by taking his own life, he's still, the last word on him is the legacy of how he participated in, facilitated, and aided and abetted and abused children before he took his own life.
And look, these particular cases of grooming, and I'm looking at them, confining it to this one, because we know cases of abuse are quite damaging when it comes to the survivors thereof. Let's talk about this untold damage, that the impact that this has had on some of these young boys, whom some are now men, and really who've gone through the most horrific of acts.
Sexual abuse for men is a complicated dynamic. I'm not saying it's worse than women or less worse. I'm just saying it's different, because the boys have to deal with issues of homophobia. They have to deal with the issues that come with the shame and the guilt of being a man. And in this particular case, the incredibly depraved kind of sexual acts that they were asked to perform and were performed on them, they then have to live with the fact that they are in a world where there are people who are there, and those people who you trust, and you go to get jobs and you want to make a life for yourself, you have to be suspicious of everybody in your world, because I think the saddest thing is I watched one of the father's evidence, because we obviously couldn't watch the children's evidence, but I watched one of the fathers, and he was heartbroken by the fact that there was this offer of a job, and all his son said is, I want to make something of my life, Dad. I want to go from a rural area to the big city, and I want to make something of my life.
Yeah.
And this is what was made of it, that they were victimized by people with huge power and privilege that is granted primarily, as the advocate said, based on access to money.
Yeah, and Advocate Madumise, very briefly, your final thoughts. I mean, these cases of grooming, are they really receiving this adequate attention that they deserve in the country?
You know, Bongiwe, I think because of the persistence of many of us in different NGOs, the media that has been assisting to bring out into the open, I think we're going to get some traction at some point for this government and then the entire country to the extent of sexual assault violations and rape and how they manifest themselves and what grooming is all about. And we get to a point where we do not ridicule victims of grooming, whether boys or men or women or young girls. It happens, and it's a reality for many. And what we don't speak about in this country is the trauma visited on victims. Because you can't touch that trauma. You cannot touch it. You understand it if it does not happen to you, right? And so we brush some of these things aside and think that the victims can continue with their lives, and not appreciating what it takes for them to be normal again after experiencing such acts performed on them. Yeah.
And it becomes a very difficult journey for, that particular individual who would have suffered that act to then be able to pick up the pieces. But, as you say, let's continue to have these conversations and continue really to make these, these perpetrators uncomfortable, because it is important that these matters are spoken about. Let me thank you both for your time. That's Advocate Brenda Madumise, Director of the WISE Collective, as well as Luke Lamprecht, Women and Men Against Child Abuse, Head of Advocacy there.